Miss Anna Rubber here, and welcome to another fine episode of Personal Readings and Dramatic Stories. Today, I am pleased to announce that we are on the last story in the Clues Book 3, The Invisible Cat book, because I have just probably nitpicked the heck out of this, because it is cray-cray. If you haven't watched the previous parts of me reading this book, by all means go ahead and watch them, because I had a blast making them, and I'm also very happy that this is over with, because the leaps in logic are just mind-boggling with this mystery book. But today we will be reading the mini mystery entitled The Late Mr. Body. "Our host is late," said Mr. Green, popping a dinner roll into his mouth and a silver fork into his pocket. "You would think," said Colonel Mustard, "that Mr. Body would know better than to leave us all alone in the dining room with his gold candlesticks." He slipped both candlesticks under his jacket. "He trusts us, the dear man," the professor said, who was busy stuffing some of Mr. Body's fine china into his briefcase. "Honestly, I don't know why he puts up with you guys." "It's true," said Mrs. White with a laugh. "Mr. Body must be the most trusting man alive. Or the stupidest. Seriously, the lack of brain cells in Mr. Body is very disturbing." Okay, where was I? She took off her white maid's cap. Underneath were stacks of several packets of bills. "Underneath, I cleaned out his safe," she explained, "and if he catches me, I'll just say I'm borrowing the money. He's so trusting, he'll believe me." "That's nothing," said Mrs. Peacock. "I'm sure I've taken more from Mr. Body than any of you. Each time I come here, I leave with something priceless. Body relic wrapped up in one of Mr. Body's fluffy towels. My fluffy towel collection alone is now worth thousands. And I've taken $1 million worth of old boys' artwork," boasted Plum. "Child's play," said Colonel Mustard. You read about yesterday's robbery in the Little Falls Bank. I've got $2 million in the jewels from Mr. Body's safety deposit box. Mr. Body called me on the phone afterward and asked me to help the police catch the thief." The guests laughed and applauded happily. "Bravo," said Mr. Green. "But I can top that. I helped Mr. Body with his taxes last year, and secretly funneled off $3 million into my own account." "Peanuts," scoffed Miss Scarlet. "I coned Mr. Body into giving $4 million to a phony charity. I told him the money was for research into the dread disease Miss Scarletsis, which turns its victims bright red." She was almost laughing too hard to speak. "I had him check out to Miss Scarlet." All the guests were laughing. Stupid rich people deserve to be robbed, can I just say? "He's the only one who would turn bright red if he knew," Miss Scarlet's whisked Mr. Green. He slapped the table. "That's too much." "Wait a minute," said Plum suddenly. The guest quieted down and waited. "Mr. Body asked me to tell you something." "What?" probed Miss Scarlet. Plum thought. "I haven't remembered that part yet." "About the new intercom," said a crackly voice. "Oh, right," said Professor Plum. "He asked me to tell you that he wants to test out a new intercom, and that he's upstairs right now listening to every word we say." The guests looked at Plum in horror. "You're joking," said Mrs. Peacock. "That's not all," said the crackly voice. The guests looked around frantically. "There!" said Mrs. White, pointing to a white intercom panel on the far wall. Mr. Green ran to the panel. "I'm shocked," he said into the intercom. "Shocked to hear what the rest of you scoundrels... The rest of you are. What scoundrels the rest of you are." Colonel Mustard tried to push Green out of the way. The rest of you are telling the truth?" he said into the intercom in a surprised voice. I was making it all up." Mrs. White shoved her away into the intercom. "Mr. Body, I tricked them all into confessing so that you would catch them. I deserve a promotion." "You deserve something," said Mr. Body. "That's for sure." He didn't say it through the intercom. He said it from a dining room doorway as he strode into the room. "He does have Miss Scarletsosis," said Plum, gazing at Body's red face. "Shut up, you ninny," snapped Miss Scarlet. She smiled cattily at her host. "Reginald, darling, we were all kidding. We just wanted to show you that the intercom works." It works all right," said Mr. Body in a fury. "So, you all think you can get away with what you've done? We'll see about that. Let's settle this like gentlemen, Mr. Body," said Colonel Mustard. You and Mrs. Peacock fight a duel." Mr. Body ignored him. "All the years I've invited you to stay at this mansion, and this is my reward?" "I'd say you were asking for it, sir." He shook his head sadly. Then he turned and marched out of the room. "Where are you going?" Mr. Green called. "To call the police, of course," came the reply. The guests all looked at one another in shocked silence. "Now what?" Wrong voice. "Now what?" said Mustard. said Professor Plum, who was calmly eating a peach. "What?" said Colonel Mustard. Professor Plum swallowed. Through zoning go-ba-da-doo," he repeated. "What are you trying to say?" said Miss Scarlet, rolling her eyes. "It's an accent," sourdough expression, explained the professor. Loosely translated, it means there's only one thing to do. And what's that? Mrs. White asked him. Everyone answered the question at once. Kill Mr. Body. So, are we all agreed? That doesn't sound right. I think it should be, so do we all agree? Not, are we all agree? Or are we all in agreement would be better. But whatevs. It gets a pass. It's a very old book. Mrs. White asked. I don't relish the idea, said Mustard, but there's no other way. Agreed, said Mr. Green. Right then, said Mustard, snapping into action. He handed out 6 revolvers. Why do we all need revolvers? Asked Peacock. Surely one of us could do the job. This way we're all in it together, explained the Colonel, and nobody can blackmail anybody. He pulled out a box of bullets. Aren't these nice? He said. They come in 6 colors. He started handing out the ammo. He gave the red bullets to Mrs. Peacock, the blue bullets to Mrs. White, the white bullets to Miss Scarlet, and the purple bullets to Mr. Green. Something tells me this is going to come into play later. I should take some dang notes, but I'm not, because that would be cheating. I mean, the book is right here in front of me. I can always turn back. Oh, and I am ripping this book. I'm a heathen. Anyway, and purple bullets to Green, and yellow bullets to Professor Plum, and green bullets for himself, Mr. Plum. Okay. I don't like this color, whined Miss Scarlet. She switched with Miss White, who had already switched her bullets with Professor Plum. Okay. Oh, because, no, that doesn't make any sense. Miss Scarlet switched with Miss White. Miss Scarlet had white, so they switched, so they had the right color. Doesn't make any sense. Ready? Now, said the Colonel. Let's all load our revolvers. They loaded their weapons. Mr. Green was scowling. I don't like the feel of my weapon, he complained. I'll switch with you, said Miss Scarlet. She handed him her revolver, and he took Mr. Green's. I'm calling it now. Somehow the ending of this has to do with what color bullets. What color bullets? It has to be. Because they are putting way too much detail into where the bullets are in here for it not to be a part of it. Or it's just a wild goose chase and I'm making a big deal out of nothing, that I'm falling right into their trap. And she took Mr. Green's. Are we all set now? Asked Mustard, his monocle twitching. In response, Mrs. Peacock switched her revolver with Miss Scarlet, and Professor Plum switched his with Mrs. Peacock. Colonel Mustard fired his revolver into the air. Enough! He shouted. We have work to do. In the locked library, Mr. Body trembled with rage as he dialed the police. At least he tried to dial the police. He was trembling so much that first he called the dry cleaners, then he called zipper repair shop, and then he called a man named Bert. The next 3 times he got a busy signal. As he dialed once again, he glanced nervously at the room. Both doors were locked. There was no way the guests would get in, he promised himself. Finally, he got through the police. "Yes, officer," Body began. "This is an emergency. Please send every available squad car at once to the following address. 1 Bang! Bang!" The shots rang out. Mr. Body was right. There was no way the guests could get in, but their bullets traveled easily through. The wooden door. Body was hit with blue and red bullets. "Hello?" said the voice on the phone. "Hello? Are you okay?" Good advice Good question too late there, sir. The receiver fell to the floor with a clunk. Mr. Body soon followed. "Hello?" the policeman shouted, but there would be no answer from Mr. Body ever again. Who killed Mr. Body? Okay. I knew it. I knew the bullets. I know the bullets are the key. Yeah. Okay. I need a notebook for this. This is probably the most complicated one ever. And I know I do not trust my brain to be able to figure this out. And I really want to figure it out because it's the last one of this book. Where's my notebook? Oh, it's all the way on the other side of the room. Excuse me. While I try to figure this out, post your thoughts below in the comments of who you think shot Mr. Body. Alright. I need a pen or a pencil. This will have to do. Alrighty. So, let's start with the ending. Okay, so we know that the killer used blue and red bullets. Okay, so now let's go back to that page where everybody was getting their bullets originally. Okay. Okay, Peacock started off with red. Peacock. Red. Okay, and then Mrs. White had blue bullets. Okay. Then the white bullets were with Miss Scarlet. I should just use Scarlet for hers. Okay, Scarlet had the white bullets. You know what? Let's do it like that. That'll be comfortabler. Okay. Then Mr. Green had purple bullets. and Plum had yellow, and the Colonel had green bullets. Alright. So Mrs. Peacock started off with red, Mrs. White had blue bullets, Scarlet had white bullets, and then Mr. Green had purple bullets, and then Mr. Plum, or Professor Plum, had yellow bullets, and then the Colonel had green bullets. Okay, so who switched after that? Alright. After that, Miss Scarlet switched with Mrs. White. Okay, Miss Scarlet and Miss White switched, giving Mrs. White her proper color, and giving Scarlet blue, okay, but Mrs. White had already switched colors with Professor Plum, which means she had purple. No, which means she had yellow. Okay, so Mrs. White switched with Plum. That means she would have yellow and he would have blue. Then she switched with Scarlet, giving Scarlet yellow, and Mrs. White white, which makes sense. Okay. Then Mr. Green said he didn't like his weapon, so he switched with Miss Scarlet. Okay. So now Miss Scarlet has green, and Mr. Green, oh wait, I messed up. He doesn't like the feel of his weapon. So then Scarlet would have purple. Do they really make bullets in all these colors? Just asking. Somebody who knows about guns, comment below. Okay, and then Mr. Green would have yellow. I'm running out of room with the way I have it set up now. Anyway. Okay, then Mrs. Peacock switched her revolver with Miss Scarlet. Miss Peacock, who hasn't switched at all till now, so okay, so Miss Peacock switches with Scarlet. So Scarlet gets her right color, red, and Miss Peacock gets purple. Okay. Okay, and Professor Plum switched with Mrs. Peacock. Okay, so they would have their right colors now, because they switched. Okay. Mrs. Peacock has her blue. Mrs. White has white. Scarlet has red, as it should be. Mr. Green has yellow. And Plum has purple, because he switched with Peacock. And the Colonel has green. So help me if I read that Mr. Green and Colonel Mustard switched and everybody just has their regular colors, I'm gonna feel like this was all for naught, and I'm gonna dramatically throw this page of paper across the room. Okay, had enough, blah de blah de blah. Okay, so nobody switched after that. Alright, so the killers used blue bullets and red bullets. That means, and given the fact that everybody has their natural colors, well, except for Mr. Green and the Colonel, our evidence right here backs up that Mrs. Peacock and Mrs. Scarlet shot Mr. Body. Even though everyone was trying to shoot Mr. Body, they were the ones that actually succeeded in shooting Mr. Body. Not that that really means anything in this book series, because death is like an inconvenience at this point in this book, but they're the ones who did it. Okay, so I'm gonna say, because evidence backs it up, I should have busted out a notebook for all of these. I probably would have gotten a lot more of them done right. Oh well. Okay, so I think Peacock and Scarlet are our killers. But post your thoughts down below in the comments, because I want to hear your thought process in the comment section. Alright, now I am about to read the solution, so if you still haven't posted your thoughts down below, do so. Okay, here is the reveal. Solution: Miss Scarlet and Mrs. Peacock with their revolvers. Well, duh. First, Plum switched with Mrs. White. So Plum had blue bullets, yes. Yes. And Mrs. White had yellow ones. Then Miss Scarlet switched with Mrs. White. So Miss Scarlet had yellow bullets, and Mrs. White had white ones. Mr. Green switched loaded guns with Miss Scarlet. So Green had yellow bullets, and Miss Scarlet had purple ones. Miss Scarlet switched with Mrs. Peacock. So Mrs. Peacock had purple bullets, and Miss Scarlet had red ones. Finally, Mrs. Peacock switched with Plum, so Plum ended up with purple bullets. Mrs. Peacock with blue, and Mrs. Peacock with blue bullets. So we figured it out. So if you guys guess the solution right without my help, post a comment below telling me so. And that concludes our read through of Clue, book number 3, The Case of the Invisible Cat. So what are my final thoughts on this book? I kind of expressed a lot of my thoughts and feelings for the book as I read it, but my final thoughts for this book is, if you find it at a yard sale and you're like a huge Clue fan, or you know someone who's a huge Clue fan, then I could recommend it. If you know someone who's a huge fan of Clue but they're an only child, so they don't really get to play the board game as much, then I would definitely recommend this, because it's a fun way to have the fun mystery aspect of the game without having to find someone to play it with you. But the one thing that got to me as I was reading it was the huge leaps in logic and stuff. So if I had to recommend this for a certain age group, I would recommend it for like preteens, because it's a good kind of lighthearted mystery. So it's got some kind of iffy stuff, but I feel like a preteen would be able to handle the tiny bit of violence that is in this book. And I wouldn't want to recommend this kind of book, given the amount of violence and killing that it has in it, to a younger audience. So I would think a preteen would be able to handle the amount of violence that is in this book and it not like be like a problem. So that would be who I would recommend this to. I would recommend it to really big Clue book board game fans, or fans that are only childs who don't get to play Clue as much, or preteens. That's who I would recommend giving this to. If you know somebody who fits that criteria and you find it for cheap, maybe give it to them as a birthday present. So yeah. Reading this and having seen the Clue movie, I would be massively surprised if this did not inspire at least some of the aspects of the movie. Even though in the movie it says it's just inspired by the board game, but this was inspired by the board game as well, so maybe it's just they had similar ideas. Because, like, just like a lot of the vibe of this is like the similar vibe you get from the Clue movie. So, yeah. So, I hope you guys enjoyed me reading through this book. Oh, would I read it again? Probably not. I've actually pretty much said that I'm going to give this to, with one of those mini free library things that you trade it with, that's, near, a trail here where I live. So, I'm going to put it there, and hopefully someone else will pick this up and read it and get a good chuckle out of it and get some good deduction fun out of it. But as for this book and this video, I will see you guys next time. Bye! What was that?